Uh, Okay, I'll say it again. It's 12:30 and I'm calling the meeting to order. Uh, I am Jonathan Klein, Chair of the ADU Subcommittee of the Housing Advisory Board. Before we begin, I'll confirm that all members and other persons anticipated to participate are present and can hear me, as I've been chatting with everyone before we started. The meeting is in open. All speakers should identify themselves by name prior to speaking. The meeting is an open session being conducted remotely and in a manner consistent with state law. Adequate public access does not require the inclusion of public participation, and this is not a public hearing. However, I expect, depending on time, to be able to invite members of the public in attendance to comment as appropriate. This is being convened by video conference, by Zoom, posted on the town's calendar. Members of the public that are not speaking are not required to identify themselves. I will add as a personal note that I always appreciate it, since this is a small meeting, that if folks are not otherwise indisposed and are willing to do so, if they turn their cameras on, it gives us more of a feel of actually being in a room and a meeting with each other, which is nice. The meeting is being recorded. Anything you broadcast may be captured. So if you don't want to do that, don't turn on your video. And Everybody is welcome to make their own recording of the public meeting, but I ask you, let me know if you're doing so. All materials provided to members of this body are available on the town's website. And we will follow the agenda unless otherwise noted. I will be moving some things around on the agenda. So now let's turn to the first item on the agenda. And that is the minutes of the two prior meetings, September 10th and October 15th. So let me ask that have been taken for us by Emily. So are there any comments on those minutes? And if not, does someone want to make a motion to approve them?
I'll make a motion to approve. I thought they looked good.
And I'll
Okay, is
second.
that both? Did that motion cover both?
Yes.
Okay, great. Is there a second?
Yes, Alex.
Okay, thank you. I will call the roll to approve the minutes. Tommy,
Aye.
Alex,
Aye.
Kelly,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you very much. For the next item on the agenda, let me mention that for those that joined us a little late, that Kelly, one of the members of the committee, has to leave for another commitment at about 1:20. And I would like to make sure we get through important things, one of which is scheduling future meetings. So I want to move that up on the agenda and look at our future meeting schedule as we try to, believe it or not, wrap up what we're doing. I know it feels like we're not close to wrap up, but we will be approaching I would assume, a February warrant article deadline, and that will be coming very soon. It is coming particularly soon because I personally will be out of the country from about January 1st to January 24th. So that puts a crimp in our ability to keep going. I would welcome you all to keep going without me, but I understand that may be also a bit challenging. So the schedule I have come up with the staff is to have a meeting, if we think we need it, again next week. I understand that's very soon, at this same time at 12:15, and then meetings on January 28th and February 11th. But I think we had some feedback that the 12:30 time did not work on one or both of those dates. So I want to check all of that with committee members and staff to see if we can get those penciled in. So first, are folks available next week on December 17th at this same time and place?
Yep.
Yes, yes, Kelly. Okay. So let's consider that scheduled for 12:30 to 2.
Jonathan, I'm not sure if you're polling staff. I am not available then, but I don't know that it moves to 2. But
I am polling staff, so I appreciate that. And I think that hopefully all the things that involve you, we can manage today. Or you can communicate back through me or through Emily and Maria.
Sounds good.
How's that? Because I don't think we have a lot of choices right now. And then the next meeting would be January 28th, which is also a Wednesday. Is 12:30 available, or do I remember, Alex, that that doesn't work for you?
It's my schedule's going up in the air starting in the mid-January. Um, right now, it looks like it's just very tight. It probably will work, but if there were other people that it also didn't work for, I'd be interested in looking at for another time, maybe later in the day. But if I'm the only one, then let's just keep it, and I'll try and make it work.
Is it easier if we move it later in the day, like 1 o'clock or 1:30 or 2? And is that okay with other people?
It would be easier, but I wouldn't move it if I'm the only one.
Okay. Can everyone else make
It's-
it at 12:30 on the 28th?
Yep, anytime on Wednesdays is generally going to be okay for me.
Okay, well then let's confirm 12:30 on Wednesday, the 28th. And how about 12:30 on Wednesday, February 11th? Also good?
They're both far enough in advance that I can at least block my calendar for those or
Okay.
another
so-
time.
Okay, so thank you for blocking your calendar. And let's put those, let's hope that we don't need any additional meetings. If we do, we'll have to schedule them on an ad hoc basis. Okay.
Jonathan, did you want to briefly mention, well, maybe we can talk about it next meeting with the engagement, upcoming, just if Kelly has to leave, but I think we could probably get in more into that in the next meeting if she has to go.
Yeah, I see that's on the agenda, under scheduling as well, that kind of community engagement. So let's talk about that now while we're talking about scheduling. One of the things that the purposes of this committee is to make sure that there's the opportunity as we develop this warrant article for adequate community engagement. Some of that opportunity comes through this meeting, although our meetings have been sparsely attended, I will say. But we also, have links to other bodies that we're all part of. And one of the things I thought we might do is schedule time in January when I'm not here to ask for public hearings of the three bodies that we represent, the advisory committee, the housing advisory board, and the planning board, as an opportunity to go over the current state of the warrant article, where we stand, give the opportunity, the public more opportunity to comment. That would depend on each of you, who are respective members of those bodies, taking the lead in that with assistance from staff, hopefully, to do that. And January would be a good time to do all that and then hopefully inform our final deliberations. What do folks think of that? Does that seem feasible, reasonable, folks willing to do it? I know, Tommy,
Yep.
you did have a report back to the planning board.
Yep, at one of our
Recently.
morning meetings, I checked in with the planning board. That was just specifically to talk about the proposed idea for changing zoning broadly to change. I think it was heights and setbacks.
Mhm.
And the planning board, everyone was very skeptical of that as an idea because of the potential creation of lots of non-conforming structures, and also very skeptical of the idea that it would only apply to new buildings because that has been attempted in the past and has not worked. So those were the two big takeaways to bring back. It was a pretty brief discussion because it was focused on that, but I would say everybody on the planning board did not like that idea at all.
Okay, well, we're going to come to that next, I think, as we get into the substance. So
Yep.
hold those thoughts. But in terms of just scheduling time in January for more general report backs, maybe we can create a little bit of a slide deck with help of the staff or something like that that we can
Yep,
use.
that'd be great.
Okay, I'm seeing nods, so I'm going to accept that as a yes.
Yeah, right. Jonathan, I don't know if you have time, but later before January 1st, but when you're leaving, but if you want me to assist or take the lead on communicating with Roger, and for the I'm happy to.
Absolutely. And happy to talk before then. I'm here through December 30th.
Cool.
So, okay. So let's move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the update on where we stand with the submission to the Attorney General's office on height and setbacks and the back and forth that's happened with that. Jonathan and Maria have taken the lead on that. Did you have one more thing, Alex, before we go on?
Yes, I did. I was thinking about community engagement, and I know when it was initially brought up about the height and setbacks, how it was at least like confused, not quite confusing, but like intricate in even in this meeting. And I thought about when we're bringing it to the respective boards and committees, if we think about how we're communicating it so that everyone in the public has a clear or accessible way to kind of understand it.
Yeah, Alex, I think I appreciate that. We actually are going to have an update on if we can even do that. So
Yeah.
it might get very simple just because of what we're
Yeah.
allowed to do and what not. So Jonathan can give us the update on the Attorney General's review of the concept.
Sure. So I submitted a very limited portion of what the whole warrant article would likely look like to Margaret Hurley, who is with the Attorney General's office, so kind of with the state, working with EOHLC now. We limited it to just the portion that would be dealing with setbacks and height, because we feel like if you look through, for example, the Attorney General's decision on the last bylaw, most of the rejections stemmed from passages that attempt to regulate those dimensions in a way that the state feels is unreasonable given the statute and regs. So we had proposed I'll call it Proposal A. Proposal A was essentially because the rubric that we're operating under is from the regs, which is that you always need to be applying the most permissive of the dimensional requirement for either single-family residential dwellings, the principal dwelling, or accessory structures. And it's those last two that's where most of it really comes down to. So we had said basically for setbacks, other than front yard, which we said they're not permitted in, we had said ADUs would be able to be built at 6 feet from the various lot lines, which is, in fact, in Brookline, the most permissive regulation we apply as of right. You, of course, can go smaller by special permit, but leave that aside. The only thing was Margaret ended up shunting me over to Kelly Gunnigan at the municipal law unit, which is frankly probably a more apt person to talk to, because it will be Kelly or one of her staff members who will ultimately be reviewing any bylaw that the town passes. So Kelly and I spoke last Monday, and on this Monday, we in terms of the setbacks, she once I explained to her what we were doing, she didn't have any issue with it. Brookline is being the most permissive it currently can be, although she did suggest as a matter of drafting that rather than write a specific dimension and have whoever is reviewing it have to look in your bylaw to confirm that it's the most permissive, she suggested, this is not a requirement, but she suggested that you actually spell that out in the text of the ADU bylaw itself, that says this is the side yard setback will be the most permissive of this, and this, which is 6 feet. We'd need to work, if we opted to go that direction, we would need to take care that any future amendments would not render that impermissible by accident. The bigger issue she took, though, was with height. Proposal A proposed for height, essentially opened with a protected use ADU may go up to 22 feet, but may go up to 35 feet, which is the most permissive dimensional requirement if you prove to the satisfaction of the building commissioner that you need it effectively. And Kelly flagged that as going, in her mind, too far. specifically because in her mind that would give the building commissioner the right to say, I am not satisfied with what you've just shown me, therefore you cannot go to 35 feet. And Kelly believed that's impermissible. You're supposed to be allowing them to use the most permissive dimensional requirement as of right, and therefore, while you can require the submission of information, as you would in, say, a site plan approval, you can't take that to the ability to say no effectively. So with respect to proposal A, as we submitted it, it did not appear to, with respect and on height, it did not appear to be viable. We have a couple different options at this point. One thing that staff has been working on is we're just revising proposal A to fit, we believe, with what to sort of strip out that limited amount of discretion and simply require a submission of the information. You have to tell the building commissioner why you want to do this, and he has to say yes, but you have to at least go through the exercise. You have to make the submission, which means you have to be ready to do it. You have to undertake that time and expense. And the whole goal here is, I believe, that from a perspective, we believe that what we want to channel people into is a logical, particularly in the case of detached ADUs, a logical ADU construction, which would never go above 22 feet because the dimensions of your building would get really weird really fast. So the hope is that if you say 22 feet, and you don't have to talk to the building commissioner at all, or you have to put together a packet of materials for submission, that will channel most applicants, other than the ones that actually really do need it. That was a proposal there. The other proposal, and we have it on the agenda here, is I've been calling it proposal B just for my reference, is what Dick Benka had put together. I spoke to a couple people, Linda Pelkey, who I think just logged on, who was asking about whether we could run that by the Attorney General's office as well. I had said, let's hold off for now because I don't want to inundate Margaret, but to the extent we want to pivot to that at some point, or it may behoove us as the town to simply get some, even if we opt for a modified version of proposal A, it may behoove us to try to know what proposal B would pass muster with the AGO. I think that could be a worthwhile avenue, but I would point out that as at least the draft that's included with the agenda materials, proposal B also includes that with respect to height, the building commissioner would need to be proven to his satisfaction that you should be able to go above that, notwithstanding the fact that there are other parts of the Benka sort of proposal B that would arguably keep anything of that height out of a certain 15 feet, I believe it was, from the lot lines anyway. So that is where we are with the AGs. Our first proposal to them was, at least in part, was a no-go. So we are thinking, should we revise it or should we try to go for a different direction? That's sort of where we are with this thing.
I did revise it as Jonathan recommended, and I'm happy to show you if you need a refresher.
So before we do that, let's just take a breath and a break because there's a lot of words there. And just ask first if there are clarifying questions for Jonathan about all the things he just said, especially about the response of the AGO, and secondly about the idea for what I'll call proposal A for the moment, and then we'll get to proposal B. Any questions? Okay.
Oh,
All
sorry.
perfectly clear. Kelly.
I do. I guess it's a practical question. So as I was reading through the modified version that includes, I guess, proposal A, one of the questions I had is what are the practical reasons you'd need more than 22 feet to construct an ADU? I was having trouble with those dimensions.
Well, I think the most likely one would be if your ADU is attached and you're putting it, say, in the attic of your single family home, then that ADU and it was new, and you actually even were building new space. Maybe you're completing a third floor to put in an ADU or something like that. That would be much higher. But I see your point, I think, goes where exactly my mind goes, which is if it's the detached ADU that we are all thinking about and we are all seeing on the news when they talk about what many companies are proposing to build, it really, I don't I don't know. Although I will say we're dealing with you guys might be familiar with the 90 Ivy property because it came up a lot last year when we were doing the ADU bylaw. That was a ADU put over a garage, which they were proposing.
Right.
And in speaking with the ADU about that matter in particular, I had initially said, like, well, look, an ADU with a garage under it is different from a protected use ADU. It's going to be higher. And I was told essentially, no, that's not the
Okay.
case. You can't be applying your dimensional requirements. For example, if you had an existing garage and you wanted to put an ADU on top of it, that can still be a protected use
Right.
ADU with all of the requisite allowances. So I could see that if you really want to go
Can I
crazy.
just add, in terms of like looking at the architecture, if you had the garage on the first floor, the ADU on the second floor, and you had a pitched roof, you would need if you wanted that pitched roof to be compatible with that of the existing structure, then you probably would need something taller than 22 feet. Otherwise, you'd have a really awkward looking pitch. It depends on the length. Remember, the pitch of the roof is going to get lower the wider the wall, the longer the wall gets. Remember, I had shown you those kind of diagrams a few months back. You can't really do much, with the pitched roof at 22 feet. If you have 2 stories, it's going to be
So,
very shallow.
and I'm aware that
Thank-
that Dick has his hand up, but the under what I'll call proposal A for the moment, it could be that someone says, I need 25 feet because I want to have a pitched roof that matches the,
Mhm.
the pitch of my existing thing. And that's why I'm doing it. And that's why I need 25 feet, not 22 feet.
Right, so
For example.
such evidence may include, but not be limited to, calculations for gross floor area, height of the pitched roof designed to be compatible with that of the principal structure, dimensions of dormers to allow for habitable space, or floor-to-floor heights designed for the addition to connect to or be consistent with those of the principal structure. So it's a really low threshold in terms of what you need to submit for evidence. It's not really a tall order. And the second, the idea here is that we want to make sure that people are putting this height because it's used for the protected use ADU and not something else. So we feel like we're in our bounds to ask for this evidence just to make sure that there isn't a loophole.
Okay, Dick. I think you're muted, Dick.
Thank you. Just following up on Maria's comment, one issue that we faced years ago was space being built and then converted, made habitable after the fact. And one possible gaming situation here is that people could add X hundred square feet to their proposed building, existing building, at whatever height is allowed, call it an ADU, and then not use it as an ADU. And I think that is a matter of concern that, it's at least something in the background as you think about whether that height would be usable as an ADU. You put a so-called kitchen in and it becomes part of a recreation room. You put the bedroom in, it becomes part of a bedroom for the house because the doorway is set up that way. And I do expect that there will be a certain amount of gaming here. So
If I could just add, I feel that the way the state implemented this, it doesn't allow for some design standards. I appreciate what you're saying. Unfortunately, it's really how the state implemented this.
But for example, saying the pitch has to be compatible with the main building, that would be at least a design guideline, if not a design
Well,
standard.
I'm saying that because what I
Yeah, so-
noticed, the Attorney General did not flag the line that said something about roof pitch shall be compatible with that of the principal structure. They didn't flag that as not allowed, so I thought that was a pretty, not, it was kind of like just a gentle design guideline, not something so restricted.
No,
Restrictive.
Maria, I really don't want to argue about the details, but my point is that 35 feet high could be part of the main structure, nominally called an ADU, and really not used as an ADU because there is nothing that compels the space that might be permitted as an ADU to be used as an ADU in the future. That's my only point. Thank you.
My recollection is that you had suggested in one of your drafts, maybe not in the current one, that we have some kind of covenant that might go with ADUs. Now, I don't know if that would be compatible with the Attorney General's guidance or not, that, requiring it to be used as an ADU. I also don't know how you would enforce that or inspect that, or, I'm a little wary of that kind of regulatory oversight, but is that still a live idea in your mind, Dick? I'm just checking in.
I don't even remember that at this point, to be
Oh,
honest.
okay. All
It's
right.
been so many months ago, but
Yeah. Okay.
it obviously would be something to consider. I don't know whether it would pass muster or not, but my only point, Jonathan, is that we have seen when I was more involved with zoning, we saw a lot of efforts to game the system just to gain square footage in a building. And I think this opens up that opportunity because there is nothing that compels that it actually be rented as an ADU.
Yeah. Well, there may be risks. Tommy, then Kelly, and then it looked like Jonathan maybe had some responses or things to say, but we'll go to
Yeah, just
Tommy and then Kelly.
just quickly on that, I think to an extent, anybody would who's interested in doing that would probably be able to do it with a 22-foot max or anything. And I'm not sure that this warrant article is going to be well equipped to handle that. I know that other municipalities have handled issues like that by, taxing vacant rental properties at a higher rate. Washington, D.C. did that. So, I think that's outside of our scope here a little bit, but I don't think it's a completely intractable problem, but I'm not sure it's our problem to solve here is also. I think I hear those concerns, but I'm not sure that it's our fight right now.
Kelly. Thank you, Tommy.
Just quick comment. Agreed that this is a potential issue that could come up. The advisory committee had discussed this specific issue the last time the ADU bylaw came through, and the assessor had some interesting data simply based on the cost of putting in a full kitchen for an ADU. And so for many people, this would be sort of cost prohibitive if you were not actually building this unit to be inhabited, So it definitely, it's a real possibility, but probably only in certain parts of town or at certain income levels. But as Tommy said, I don't know if that's really our full problem to solve here today.
So thank you. So just to summarize where we're at on this issue, our initial proposal was accepted on setbacks, but rejected on height. The staff has come up with what I'll call Proposal A, related to height, that has less protection than the initial draft did, that was deemed incompatible with the regulations, but has some protection against situations that we might not want to see, but maybe not complete. Dick has proposed, and maybe this is the time to talk about that, sort of a alternative approach. And I know we did talk about that at a prior meeting. It might be, and I think you're talking about that, Jonathan, as, you know, in effect, proposal B, and a suggestion about whether it would be possible to test that out just for feasibility with the AG, putting aside the question of which proposal, you know, the committee, you know, prefers and wants to go forward. It's just useful to know which ones are legal and which ones aren't. So is there someone that can kind of, either Jonathan or Dick, sketch out what that approach is and how we would go about getting a reading on that?
Jonathan, let me defer to you on this.
Sure. But I will be relying on you, Dick, if I if I blow past anything that's important. I'm gonna basically jump to the dimensional requirements, because I believe that the most impactful proposals here, as well as the things that we're kind of talking about right now, are there. Although Dick's proposal is a holistic one that addresses all it's a full rewrite to the extent proposal A had not reached that point yet.
Yeah, and I was focusing for this discussion, you know, just on the things that address the issue we're talking about now, which is the height and setback question.
So yes, so in the section of the in 4.053, which is the ADU section, it requires that for attached ADUs, they comply with the dimensional requirements of 5.01, which means they're not going to be able to utilize the accessory structure setbacks, for example, because those are in separate sections. And then detached ADU, but that may be appropriate in that case because, again, these are for attached ADUs. Detached ADUs, however, utilize the accessory buildings, set the setbacks for accessory buildings. So, you know, there's already the sort of bifurcation of how we treat the two things, which is an aspect that we have not vetted with the AGO, but you know, that it may be a way to ultimately go, particularly given what Dick's proposal does in the back half, which I will get to in a second. With respect to height, I believe it more or less it says that you can go to the height of the principal dwelling if you provide evidence to the satisfaction of the building commissioner. That's what I had flagged earlier. I don't know if that would fly necessarily. However,
Well, we kind of know it wouldn't, right?
yes, exactly. Well, in Dick's proposal, however, I don't know that it would fly, but I think removing it would be even less impactful than in proposal A, because the crux, in my opinion, of what Dick's proposal does with height is essentially says it creates this zone that is at least 15 feet from the side lot line, or 25 feet from the rear, or whatever the setbacks are if they're less. So this is a zone in which nothing can be higher than 15 feet. So I think the approach there is, okay, if we always have to allow the most permissive dimensional requirement for that zone that's near to this property line, the most permissive requirement for anything is 15 feet. So that's a interpretation which we have not vetted, but it does it matches what it's at least closer to the regs than just simply saying accessory dwelling structures. I think in an earlier proposal we had was accessory dwelling structures, ADUs can't be more than this high if they're this close to the property line. You're not holding them to a separate standard or matching them to the accessory structure standard, which is not permissible because you have to let them do the most permissive. Here you're saying at least within a certain lot, there are different zones. And for the close to the lot line zone, stuff needs to be short. For the farther from the lot line zone, stuff can be tall. And then in order to make that work, Dick proposes to not just amend the ADU section, but also certain other sections of the bylaws to bring everything kind of to have it all work together. He amends the various sections related to accessory dwellings to make it clear that those can't be more than 15 feet high. He and would amend also the table 5.01, which is, this is a big one. This is our zoning table for dimensional requirements that says, and footnote 23 would be added that says, in all districts, the maximum height shall be 15 feet for any new building or structure, new addition or other new construction that is within this sort of zone that's close to the lot line. So that's what Dick's proposal is doing. I think it was mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there's some question. Oh, I think Tommy might have brought it up with what the planning board's concern is with only allowing something for new construction. This is a very very much a gray area. I will say that notwithstanding what the planning board opined, we have advanced bylaw amendments in the recent years that attempted to only target new construction, and that was distinct from what we were told we couldn't do, which is only to target new buildings. So the distinction here is zoning has to be uniform. So you can't say a building that was built before 2025 gets this zoning, a building that was built after 2025 gets this zoning. We can't do that. But what we believe, at least when we've tried to do recently, is say, no matter how old your building is, if you're doing something new to it, and this would obviously apply if you're building something brand new, but it would also apply to if you're adding additions to it. If it's something new, you have to apply this standard, but if it's anything existing, doesn't. And this is, of course, an attempt to try to keep existing buildings, many of which the principal structures currently exist within this zone, would keep them from falling out of compliance. Because one issue with Dick's, out of a necessity, Dick has had to, this bylaw has a fairly significant footprint beyond just ADUs. Because out of necessity, again, he has to make this zone where everything has to be short. And so everything includes principal structures, accessory structures, ADUs, pre-existing principal structures. So you would theoretically have an issue where, well, my house is already, 10 feet from less than the setback. Am I now pre-existing non-conforming with respect to setback? I believe that the new construction would argue that no, unless you are putting on a new wing, deck, bumping out your kitchen, adding an ADU, that sort of thing. So that's my, I apologize, Jonathan, you scolded me for talking too long. That's my take on Dick's presentation.
Yeah, and the effort was to deal with the nonconformity of pre-existing and all of the Diedrich case law, etc. So, whether it did that successfully or not, who knows? But that was certainly in the back of my mind.
So I have two questions. Maybe others have questions too, but let me just put mine forward. One is, was that fair and a good description, Dick? And let me ask you my second question.
We'll go with that, yeah.
Which is there a particular reason you chose the height of 15 feet, which allows a one-story building, basically, as opposed to 22 feet, or something closer to that, which would allow the addition over the garage example that we've talked about so much. I'm just curious what your thinking was on that.
I will say I was not thinking of the addition over the garage with a sloping roof on top of that. What I was thinking about is the 22-foot high cubic block building that has raised the ire of so many people as it's gone in. So that is something that I think could be played with, but that my thinking was not something on top of a garage.
Are there other questions about that approach?
And I'm sorry, let me just add, I think 15 feet was the height that was used in the original planning department proposal, the concept, if I'm not mistaken, of a, was it not?
We used 22 feet in the
Okay.
one that we submitted.
Okay, sorry.
Other questions about that, Alex? Or comments?
I was curious, Jonathan Simpson, how things could fall if this was adopted, Dick's proposal, how things would then fall, pre-existing structures could fall out of compliance, because it sounded like, I'm less familiar with all the zoning law, but Dick had taken the maximum height for all of the structures that were currently permitted and the maximum height for the in one zone, in the farther zone, and then the maximum height for a closer zone for the principal structure. So wouldn't, if that assumption is not true, then this question is not going to make sense. But if that exterior closer to the lot lines was already like other structures were already at their 15 feet, then how could they fall out of compliance? It sounds like they got their respective, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that the problem is the devil's always in the details, is that there are many structures that exist closer to property lines. Some of them are already pre-existing non-conforming with respect to setbacks, and those wouldn't really be affected. But Dick's proposal eliminates the ability to get relief from that. So arguably, if you are closer to a lot line by special permit, the question then arises, well, then what's your status now that you're taking advantage of a special permit that is no longer available? And then, it's a fair point, though. I think Dick's drafting was intended to essentially, like you said, like most of the time this wouldn't matter because the high stuff is already far away from the property line. But in my experience, every lot is different, and you'll run into situations that you wouldn't necessarily expect. In addition, this is a very, very, very complicated, pre-existing nonconformity is a very, very complicated issue. And I don't want to sound like I'm speaking like I know exactly what's going to happen with any particular situation. I just think that it does, I appreciate that Dick is trying to address the issue rather than just rezoning townwide and letting the chips fall where they may. He's at least trying to sort of keep it out of, keep the situation as limited as possible while still achieving his goals.
Okay, so is there you alluded to this earlier, and you said that it had been raised, I guess, by Linda, who's now on the call, whether there is a question about the viability of this approach with the Attorney General, and whether that is something we could feasibly, with your relationship with them now and conversation that's ongoing, test out in a relatively simple way, or timely way, maybe is what I'll say. Nothing is simple here, I understand.
Yes, I think Linda floated that idea early a while back, and I said I certainly think it would help prior to town meeting. Doesn't necessarily mean like in the next 2 weeks, but if this was a situation where this proposal was going before town meeting, I would want to be able to utilize the AGO's offer and be able to tell town meeting that this passes the smell test in its unamended form, to the extent you want to do something weird on the floor. But because Dick's proposal does have some variations, significant things I have not seen yet in for example, other like bylaws they've allowed. And I would want to know for certain that this would work for as well. But again, I don't know. I'm trying to be sensitive to their workload, and I don't want to just be sending them every time we come up with a new draft. So if we were, like I said, pivoting to proposal B, as the subcommittee was opting to, I would sort of advance that to the front of the queue. I think no matter what, if proposal B if we come up with something else and Dick wants to advance proposal B, file a petition for it, I think I would probably still try to get some advice, get the AGO to look at it, just so I could speak to it if I was asked. But as of right now, I'm happy. I think you could characterize it properly, Jonathan, that it's a good conversation. So I'm happy to continue having it to the extent with whatever proposal we want to move forward with.
Well, I think that I'm not sure I got the answer I wanted there. My question is it possible to call them up now and say, is this a viable approach or not? Because if it's not, then we may not want to spend time pursuing it.
Sure. Yes, absolutely. I think that I could probably, but hopefully before the January meeting, holidays permitting, I could probably get you guys an answer on this one. Yeah.
I think that's probably worthwhile. I mean, I think we need to have a discussion here, and maybe now is the time to do that about which approach we like best, right? The one that we've talked about, we'll call it proposal A and proposal B, right? Proposal A is a variation on what we had talked about before, but with fewer guardrails, right? In terms of the possibility of taller buildings that, may be closer to the lot line than might make some people comfortable. But we know complies with what the Attorney General, we think will comply based on the way, the advice you've gotten and proposal B, which is sort of a completely different approach that Dick has, thought through carefully, but which is a more likely more restrictive in what it's going to allow in terms of ADUs, in finding a different way to solve the AG problem. I don't, if you think that's an unfair characterization, you can say so. But anyhow, that's do folks want to kind of pick between those and then proceed down one or the other, and we can take comments on that. I see Linda's hand raised. Linda, welcome.
Hi, thanks. Sorry, I'm kind of multitasking here today. I just wanted to speak a little bit in favor of at least trying to define the walls of the box that we're within. And what I mean by that is I think it would be helpful to have the feedback on Dick's proposal from the AG, just because I think we're working in this small little group and we can't possibly imagine how the broader community or through the vetting process when we get to the warrant articles stage, whatever, what kind of issues are going to be of concern to people and what things they might see as being attractive in Dick's proposal. So I would just encourage us at this stage to try to get as much feedback from the AG as possible and to keep our mind open to other possibilities. So that's really all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex.
If I remember, Kelly, you need to leave shortly. I just wanted to see if you had any input before you're heading out.
Oh, thanks. I guess my only comment, I guess, Jonathan, in terms of your question is, I do feel like it's too soon to pick Avenue A or Avenue B, since we haven't really fully discussed Dick's proposal. With Linda, I think there's some, it's a really interesting approach. And we certainly haven't heard, I think, enough about it to say, okay, we're gonna go all B or all A. But I would like to explore it further. I do think there are some fairly interesting ideas there.
Well, I think that leans toward asking Jonathan. Thank you, Linda. Kelly, I apologize. Thank you, Kelly. I think that leans toward asking Jonathan S. to go ahead and make that inquiry in the most effective way you can. Maybe there's a very slight chance we could know something by next week, although you won't be with us next week, so that seems pretty unlikely. And then we're off until January 28th. So there is quite a delay there, but I don't see any choice other than to go forward and then report back to the committee, as soon as we know something.
Jonathan Simpson, could I just ask you, in terms of guardrails, just a reminder that this is under section 3 under Dover. So people could, even with the very restrictive bylaw, could they still basically under exercise their rights under Dover to do something different from what the bylaw says?
Yes, that is a very important point. We are trying to sort of talking about the box like Linda was just referencing. We're trying to do something that we know will work with the regulations in terms of what is unreasonable or unreasonable with respect to regulation. Any individual person that wants to build an ADU and gets told no because of the way we zone could challenge it as unreasonable with respect to that case. And I think there is a concern, and one of the reasons why I want to talk about this with the AGO is when does your zoning go so far that everyone is just going to challenge this because it's unreasonable on its face, even though it doesn't trip the regulations? So I will be, that's another question. But yes, I think that's running underneath all of it is a if we don't err on the side of sort of permissiveness, we are setting ourselves up for a potentially, depending on how attractive these things are,
Right.
a string of challenges because everyone will still have they're all exempt. I mean, that's your starting point in any case.
Exactly. And then the second thing I wanted to say is that we're dealing with so many section 6. I mean, you can talk to Polly about the majority of the ZBA 48 cases are section 6 cases. And it's basically
She's referring there to prior non-conforming structures.
pre-existing non-conforming, which means there is no limit really to what you can ask for. You can go beyond FAR, it's open space, setbacks. And if we're making changes to principal structures, and it has nothing to do with the different neighborhood districts, which are all have different development patterns that are already not consistent with the zoning. They're out of whack. You're only intensifying those pre-existing nonconformities and basically saying anyone can do section 6. So what looks like it's more restrictive is actually creating a worse situation than we currently have with our zoning, which is we're trying to limit the section 6 applicability because there is no predictability about what people can do.
Can you just explain, just so we're all on the same page, what section 6 what you mean by section 6 applicability?
Yeah, section 6, there's a whole suite of case law that says if you have a pre-existing nonconformity, let's say your FAR is the maximum allowed is 0.3 and you're at 0.36. It says if you have a pre-existing nonconformity and you want to add an addition, you can exceed that and there is no upper limit. As long as you're not that the extension is not worse than the current nonconformity, it's not more detrimental to the neighborhood.
And you're a single or two family home.
And you're a single or two family, which is, I think, what Dick is mostly concerned about here, and where that applicability
And
is.
that's what,
And
and
it
that's
also applies to things that have already been demolished. So it's not has nothing to do with like legacy projects. If you demolish it, that pre-existing nonconformity still is on the books, so to speak.
Yeah, and that's what is also referred to as Diedrich cases, right?
Diedrich, yeah, there's a whole suite of them, but we refer to them as Diedrich.
Yes. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not sure. We've lost Kelly, so I'm not sure that we can. I have two other things I would love to cover at this meeting if we can, and I'm a little concerned about the time frame of how all this will play out and how we're going to figure it out, to be honest. But I don't have another solution right now for how to move that along. Unless staff has, any other suggestions, or Alex.
I had a little different idea of instead of starting bottom up, kind of saying, well, we know what we know about option A. We don't know how the AG's office will say about option B. So let's get all the information first and then figure out which path. If we can rule, if we all have leaning towards A or B, I think before it was A. Jonathan Klein, you asked if there's a leaning, but no one really answered. And then I also heard from Jonathan Simpson, kind of how much resources we can really ask for from the AG's office. So I wondered about kind of getting a sense between this meeting and next meeting about where we think is feasible before we could possibly put them into the January. No, it wouldn't be ready for public hearings. But because we'd have to go back to the AG's office again in January.
Well,
Is that right?
maybe what you're saying is, let me try and say the another. If we can, come to a conclusion at our next meeting, which is in a week, and if the consensus of the committee is that we prefer option A no matter what, then we can proceed on that basis. And if we don't have agreement on that, then it perhaps is more complicated. Is that?
Yeah. Sounds fair.
So I think I'd like to wait until next week to try and take a vote like that since Kelly's not with us, but I think that makes sense.
Okay.
Tommy, did you have a comment on that?
I can save it until next week, I guess, but
Okay.
Yeah, I think that'd be better at this point.
Okay. So the two things I wanted to talk about in addition, one of which is on the agenda and one of which is not really on the agenda. So someone will tell me if I'm out of line, but I want to raise it anyhow. Sergio is with us, and he has raised an interesting question, which I have passed along to staff about how this is the thing that's not on the agenda, but maybe it's simple and maybe it's not. I don't know about how we compute habitable square feet for purposes of this regulation and whether that complies with the intent of the statute and regulations. And I confess I have not been following the intricacies of this question because it's beyond me, but I wanted to at least raise it as an issue we need to deal with. And I don't know if we can talk about that. If you have a thought about that, Maria, I know you've seen and commented on Sergio's email that we got this morning. So this is not a decision issue, because it wasn't noticed on the agenda, but it's just I want to be able to at least raise it so we know it's out there.
Got it. So the what Sergio is saying, that the way the zoning bylaw calculates gross floor area, it is not consistent with the way the building code does. So that's a conversation for another day. But the state's model bylaw for ADUs uses this definition. And what we can do is we can use this definition uniquely for the ADU section, if Jonathan thinks this is a good idea. Because the way you have 900 square feet or 50% of the gross floor area of the principal dwelling. So you would need to have a definition that's consistent with the state code. And that's what I'm pulling up here from the state's model bylaw.
Yeah. Sergio, does that address the question that you're raising?
Good afternoon. First of all, I should tell you that unlike probably most of you, I'm dealing with the problem of designing ADUs. And I've been doing that now in probably 10 other communities other than Brookline.
So to interrupt, just for those that don't know Sergio, he's a longtime, well-respected and highly sought-after architect.
I would say long time, and the rest of it I would not pay much attention to.
Okay.
Let's just say I've been kicking around for a long time. And I've been dealing with this problem of multiple communities who've been trying to address the same issue of how do you respond to the state's initiative, which I think we would all agree was perhaps done in a hasty manner and not very thoughtfully. On the other hand, I would remind us all that the fundamental point here is that this is an intentional slap on the wrist to all Massachusetts municipalities for their failure to produce affordable housing. That was the intention. And therefore, what we've been seeing, or what I've been seeing as I've been watching AG letters to all of these other communities, Brookline is only one, the general direction has been very clear. And I think Jonathan alluded to it, and so did Maria, is that you really are not going to be able to impose Brookline's definitions on this process. And I would urge all of you to not spend a lot of time trying to do that, because I don't believe it's productive. The fundamental question that I've been struggling with clients in Brookline, I don't know how to define the 900 square feet. The original intention, which I had reviewed back in October of 24 with the planning board, I was told that we were going to use our zoning definition, 208. And that explicitly includes as habitable all the areas the state code excludes. Meaning that when I design a unit in Brighton, I have much more habitable area than if I'm designing a unit in Brookline. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And it's certainly a disservice to a young family who's trying to live in the unit. For example, we talked about a unit on the third floor of a building. Where do I start counting? Do I start at the front door down at the street? Do I count the stairs and the shared foyer and all the way up to the third floor and down the corridor? That's all part of the unit? Well, that's the question. Now, Maria has correctly pointed out that the state definition, and one which I think makes entirely good sense, could be adopted here. And Maria has further suggested perhaps you adopt it only for the ADU and you leave the rest of it in place. Brookline's decision to count all those other spaces was, as Dick had earlier alluded to, the result of the zoning commission that reviewed the problem of so-called McMansions and building bulk. And we were trying to debulk by counting as much as possible within the FAR. So that's the origin of that particular thing. At any rate, thank you all for the work that you're doing. And I have nothing else at the moment.
Thank you. So I see Dick's hand up, but what I take from that is that the proposal that Maria has made as a way to address this, addressing it just for purposes of ADUs, works and is acceptable, addresses the question you've raised. We may have a bigger question in Brookline about our how we define things versus how the state does. That I think is beyond the scope of this subcommittee to do anything about or make a recommendation on. So I don't think we have to trouble ourselves with that.
Agreed.
And the next topic on my agenda was to talk about size of ADUs. So this leads into that perfectly. But Dick, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this actually was an issue that I tried to address in my draft, and I included a definition of gross floor area in the draft, and it said for the purpose of determining the permissible maximum square footage of an ADU, and it adopted the state definition, the sum of the areas, et cetera, et cetera. I also included the state language that where there are multiple principal dwellings on the lot, you use the gross floor area of the largest dwelling and add it at the end for the purposes of determining compliance with the zoning bylaw, including dimensional standards. The definition of gross floor area in the existing bylaw shall apply. So that language could be fiddled with a little bit, but the draft that I put together carved out the ADU situation and used the state language.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for,
And I think that's an entirely appropriate way to go. So.
Sergio?
Yeah, thank you. Just for a moment, I wanted to remind us that it's my understanding that this definition applies in both directions. And let me
Yeah.
clarify what that means. Yes, it addresses how you design the ADU, but it also addresses how you measure the existing dwelling to calculate the 900 or the 50%. Are you following what I'm saying? Yes, okay, that's all. As long as you have to understand it's going to apply in both directions. Thank you.
And I think Dick said that his draft did that, right?
Yeah.
Is that correct? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Alex?
I don't have a comment on the specifics of those topics, but I just want to thank Sergio for the comment, which I had been on my mind, but I couldn't put it as eloquently, of the state's kind of mandate to produce more affordable housing, that we kind of haven't done, or a difference of opinion in the state saying you need to do more of this, and to dwell on the details less and uphold that.
Yep, that's generally my thought. I was going to save it for next week because it sounded like that's when we were going to talk about it.
So there's one, okay, I think we can rely on the staff to get that definition and definitional change into the current draft, and I appreciate that. I have had on the agenda for a couple times the question of size of ADUs, and I wanted to have a discussion about that. Maybe that will be the last thing we'll take up today. Let me, and I have a proposal, a specific proposal that I will float, and then we can, take it up perhaps and decide if we want to go in this direction at our next meeting. The taking into account the revised definitions of how we count everything, which is a great start. One of the things I know, I've been thinking about whether 900 square feet is the right number for ADUs, and whether in some cases a larger number might be more helpful in creating more housing that is useful to people, and that creates more opportunities, and whether 900 will unreasonably limit what people can do. And I have come up with two thoughts in that of places like where I would like to suggest a change in our approach. You'll recall that when we started out and reviewed the first draft, one of the things we noticed is that the Brookline bylaw currently in existence, before we made any change, our prior bylaw allowed ADUs up to 950 square feet. And that was in our bylaw. It was something that had been decided, vetted, talked about, passed by town meeting. And so we had talked about whether to preserve that 950 square foot size as a non-protected ADU, right? Create protected ADUs at the state limit of 900 square feet, but allow for a separate kind of ADU that might not be protected, that might be by special permit at 950 square feet. I think when we talked about it, we thought, gee, for 50 extra square feet, it's really not worth a whole different approach and provision. So we, I think, passed by that idea. I came back to it and said, could we make the protected ADUs 950 square feet? That seems to be something that is allowed under the state regulatory scheme. We're allowed to go to higher numbers. We just can't go to a lower number. And so my proposal is that we allow a little bit of extra space and create a little bit extra opportunity by going with what Brookline had already decided it wanted for an ADU size, which is 950 square feet. So that's part one of my idea proposal. Part two is that in existing homes, as opposed to newly constructed ADUs, there may be opportunities to create ADUs where the structure of the home doesn't easily fit. And I know one case of this in particular, 900 square feet, and where you might have a third floor or something that is 1,000 or 1,100 or more square feet that could easily be converted into an ADU. And it seemed to me that in those cases where there's no significant change in an existing structure, right? So we don't raise any of the other concerns we have about height and setbacks. We could be more liberal. And so my thought there is that for existing structures where we're preserving the existing structure, and I know that there may be a legal question about this, so we can deal with that, that we allow 1,200 square feet, so that we create a structure for our ADU bylaw that says a protected ADU is 950 square feet for new construction, and in the case of conversion of existing space and preservation of the existing structure, we can allow it to be up to 1,200 square feet. So that is my idea that I'm floating for comment. Alex.
That sounds good, reasonable, a little tepid though, with no offense intended. I think originally, I have the question that I'll hesitantly ask, is that we originally talked about just 1,200, or I remember specifically, Tommy, you might have asked, why don't we just leave the whole thing at 1,200? It would, for protected use, it's very liberal, which I think sorts with the idea of more housing, which I think which where I lean. And that's the question I have out there. The only hesitancy in my mind is it then puts more pressure on the dimensional requirements. And I also remember Jonathan Simpson saying there's no strict prescription for where it should be between 900 and 1,200, or 900 and 1,200. It's kind of
I'll just answer that quickly. I had earlier been leaning toward a larger number in general, and I talked to some people that are involved, representing people that are looking at ADUs and looking at doing ADUs. And what I found out is that for new construction ADUs, to the extent those are happening at all in Brookline, there doesn't seem to be a demand for much more than the 900 or 950 square feet, that the 12, given the size of most Brookline lots, and, the possibility just isn't there. And so, I know Newton has larger sizes and has allowed larger sizes, and I have talked about that in the past. So I appreciate your comment that my proposal might seem a little tepid compared to what I had talked about in the past. But I was looking both for a place that would be easier to find consensus, and I also, based on some discussion I've had, found that demand wasn't there for the size that I was talking about. So,
thanks.
Richard and then Maria. Or
Thank
Dick,
you.
sorry. I keep seeing your name as Richard, but I know it's Dick.
No, I actually answer to both. I'm putting on my lawyer's hat now, and I would just note that the definition of an ADU in the statute and in the regulations is not larger in gross floor area than 1/2 the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. And that is incorporated as the definition of a protected use ADU. So I'm going to ask Jonathan to weigh in on this, but my understanding of the statutory scheme is that once you go beyond that 900 square feet, it is not a protected use ADU. It can't be a protected use ADU. And it would be by special permit, or even if allowed by right, you could put that one in at 1,200 square feet or 950 square feet, and you would still have a right to put in an additional 900 square foot ADU as a protected use ADU. So you would be opening the door to 2 ADUs on the property once you allowed beyond 900 square feet. And I will toss that out there. Thank you.
Jonathan Simpson, I believe that the state does allow us to come up with our own definition of protected use ADU. And once we have like a special permit, then that can be in addition to the protected use ADU.
Correct. Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
correct.
no, that part I get. The special permit plus protected means there are 2 ADUs. But I believe we've addressed the question that we can define protected use ADU as more than 900 square feet.
Mhm.
That is my understanding as well.
So it sounds like Dick may be disagreeing with that as a legal matter based on the language of the statute. So that's something we should find out.
All right, Jonathan, okay, so I wanted to address your idea, and I wanted to do this in a way that could be not overwhelming, but also get to the point of, I know that you've been concerned about the +1, how do we, allow for, say, 3 units? So one thing I would say that if you had additional parameters around your special permit, 1,200 square foot, if that you were recommending a 1,200 square foot ADU by special permit, correct? Was that your idea?
I'm recommending a 1,200 square foot ADU where it is within an existing structure. And whether that is by right or by special permit.
But not a definite, you're not changing the definition of protected use ADU. This would be, allow for the second unit, correct? Well, the way I understand it, let's just make it simple so that, because we probably have just a few minutes here, but let's say from what I hear, you would have the protected use ADU in addition to the principal dwelling, and then you'd have the special permit option. And so in a single family district, that could be 3 units. In a 2-family, that could mean more, that could mean 4 units. In a district where we're testing out going to 3-family, that could mean 5 units. So one way to maybe put a box around it, but still allow for up to 3 units. If you were to look at, say, put a cap on 3 units, if a special permit is an option, confine it to single family uses so that you have that cap of 3 and you don't have the unintended consequences of potential demolition going to 5 units because you don't know what might happen. Okay. And then another option is, I get concerned when people say, if you're not making any changes to the existing structure, well, there are always workarounds. People demolish, build structures, and then it's an existing structure. So if you also thought about LHDs, there are 8 LHDs, and a lot of them are single family districts. That's kind of an easy place to start, because those folks, they have their design guidelines. They can also put additional design guidelines, and they tend to be bigger homes. It's a good way to not have to really come up with form-based zoning for all of these districts where it might be applied, where you might have unintended consequences. And when you think about that 75% of Brookline's land area is zoned single family, it's not the 2-family districts that need the incentives here, because the ADU can mean 3 units already. That's like an automatic +1. You really need a solution for your single family. So I'm not recommending it. I'm just giving you some food for thought, just to balance the unintended consequences with some of the policy that you'd like to advance.
I'm going to call on Emily and then I think I have a response because I think I'm not, but go ahead, Emily, first.
I was just double checking the size question. So I'm looking at FAQ that the state put out, and it says that a town can allow for larger protected use ADUs over 900 square feet. And then within this webpage that I can send out to, it says if there are more permissive rules beyond what's required by the state, such as larger than 900 square feet, then it has to be, and you all probably know town meeting better than I, there has to be a supermajority votes, or they may wish to cast 2 votes, one on the minimum standards and one on expanded standards. So, I think that, keeps in mind how this may go to town meeting, based on what the committee chooses to adopt, and that you can do more than 900 square feet.
So let me, and we're getting close to 2 o'clock, so I want to begin to wrap things up. My objective was not actually to create any back doors or side doors for extra units. I mean, I love the idea of extra units, but that was not my objective with this proposal at all. My objective, really was pretty simple, which was to take the 900 and make it 950, which accords with our prior policy and what the size of an ADU, should be, number one. And number two, to create more flexibility within existing buildings where the 900 or 950 square foot limit may be constraining and prevent someone from being able to create, a reasonable ADU within the structure of the existing building. So I was thinking of those both as protected ADUs so as to not permit, a special permit ADU and then have someone be able to come back and get another one.
Right.
That has been talked about, I understand that
Yeah.
concept, but that's not what I was trying to
I get it.
accomplish with with this proposal.
Right, but I do wonder if you can have like such a restrictive condition saying if you don't change the exterior, can you really call that a protected ADU? I think that part, that piece, that condition would be in conflict with the statute. Because
Okay.
I just think it's too restrictive.
Okay, well, we should, I appreciate that. I'd like to try and run that down before the next meeting and see if we can get,
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a Jonathan Simpson question, but that's my reaction. Sorry,
Do
Jonathan.
you have a quick comment before we wrap up, Jonathan Simpson?
I don't. I'm just trying to memorialize what you want me to run down, which is that it is, because my impression was that you weren't saying that the only way you could build a protected use ADU would be to not touch the exterior of the structure. You were saying that you could build a bigger protected use ADU if you weren't going to touch the outside of the structure.
Correct.
I think that it's interesting, and I'm really glad Emily flagged the second section here, which, as I had said earlier, I agree with Maria's basic point, which is that we can go bigger. And I think Emily's citations here show it. But her citation also does point out a distinction, because if you go over 900, you've now triggered the requirement that you get a 2/3 vote at town meeting rather than a simple majority. So I think that there is an element of, if you're going to go bigger, particularly if now you're sort of hitting this like 2-tiered structure where you can go up to 900 or 950 under one, essentially by right, and then 1200 also by right, but you have to do all these other things. I think that could probably be, I don't think that would be unreasonable on its face, but I would, I think you might get bogged down a little bit if you're saying that, if you're trying to call that 1200 version a protected use ADU, in what you're trying to make is a very limited circumstance, I think you'd be opening yourself up for someone to try to build it in the way they want, and for us to say, no, you're changing too much of the exterior, and for them to then challenge that as an unreasonable regulation. But then that brings back the question of, well, is Section 3 really in play here, which is the exempt uses, because if we're going bigger than 900 square feet anyway, so I'd have to look into this more. But it is I do want to defer. I'll knock it back to you, Maria. I think there are some planning issues with trying to keep it the way it is, but legally I'll have to look into this, Jonathan. I'll run that down before.
Okay, thank you. Sergio, and
Just
then we'll,
a quick comment, folks, which is to your thought. It seems to me highly unlikely that you can put an ADU inside an existing structure and not make exterior modifications, for the simple reason that we're required to provide separate entrance and egress. So it would be very unusual you know, maybe you could repurpose an old servant stair that was in the house or something, and maybe it's legal, but it's unlikely. Some exterior changes probably going to happen. I like the idea. By the way, other communities have dealt with this problem by making the larger unit available by special permit. So they start you out, you get your ADU by right, but if you want to go further, that's really what the state law has now.
Right. The objection that's been stated to that is that if you then allow it by special permit, it's no longer a protected ADU, and then
That's
someone
right.
can build a second one. That they then have, you have your special permit, ADU, and then you have a legal right to build a protected use ADU, so you could do two.
You're referring to simply the sequence, because you would get 3 units either way. You start out with your protected one first, and then you get a bigger one by special permit. But I take your point. Valid. Thank you.
That's the concern. All right. It's 1:56. I think we've set our future meeting schedule. I'm not sure if we've resolved more than we've opened up here. So that doesn't get us as far down the line as I would like to getting to resolution, but we are where we are, and we have another meeting scheduled next week, and I'll try and maybe with help of the staff to refine that meeting so that we can start making some decisions about direction on these questions and take some votes if necessary, and then move forward. So thank you everyone for your participation. Good conversation, good ideas. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thanks, Jonathan.